Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of this reading vlog cannot end until I complete my TBR game. If you're new to my channel then I will have the playlist linked in the description just in case you would like to check out more reading vlogs like this, but in short I have a TBR game. We start at the start space, move around the board selecting prompts or genres as we go, and then the game ends when I pass the finish line. That's it for the intro. I have actually already done my first roll for this vlog. I did it at the weekend because I needed a new book to read. I've actually been ill recently. I had a cold last week. I have done the first roll, so I will insert that footage here and you can see that we landed on fantasy. We also rolled a 1, which isn't the best start to this vlog, but we landed on fantasy, so I decided to take the opportunity to continue a series that I've been meaning to continue all year. I read the first book in the series a few years ago and really enjoyed it, so I picked up the latest book. The book I'm currently reading is *, by the way, by L.R. Lamb. This is a very shiny edition because it's covered in plastic. Couldn't remember the word there. This is the sequel to Dragonfall, which should be on the shelf behind me. Here it is. We recently reorganised these bookshelves. I don't know if you can really tell. Well, you can tell because we have a massive gap here, but basically we have these two bookshelves here which are mostly my books, and then this middle shelf is now a Malazan shelf completely. We've also got some Malazan artwork up there, and then there's 2 more bookshelves on the end, so that's what we did last weekend. As I was saying though, *, is the sequel to Dragonfall, which I read 2 years ago now and really enjoyed. I think it's such an underrated fantasy book. It has quite a low average rating on Goodreads. I think the last time I checked it had a 3.5 average rating, and in my mind it doesn't deserve that low of a rating. I completely understand some people don't get along with the writing in this because it's told through first person, second person and third person, so I know that some people have found that a little bit jarring, but in terms of the actual story I think it's a really creative world. It's set in this world where several centuries ago humans and dragons lived in harmony together. However, humans betrayed dragons, stole their magic and banished them to this other parallel world. So at the start of this book, the last male dragon is pulled into the human world by this thief called Arcady, who is performing a ritual. I don't know how much to say because I can't remember what's said in the synopsis, but basically Arcady is a thief who has this mission to clear their family name. They accidentally pull the last male dragon into this world, and it's also a romance. I wouldn't say that this is romantasy, but there is a romance, and the relationship between Arcady and Everon is very much a focus within the story. It is a little bit slow in the beginning, but I think that's because it has such a rich and detailed world, but it was those details that made me fall in love with the book. For example, this is a queer norm world, so the way that people let others know of their pronouns is through sign language, and yeah, I really liked the world in this, and I found the relationship between dragons and humans quite interesting. How humans now, because humans have short lives, they've forgotten what happened. Dragons haven't forgotten though. They are thirsty for revenge, but the humans worship dragons like they're gods. I feel like I am starting to ramble, but basically I really liked this first book, and the second book came out earlier this year, so I grabbed a copy when I went up to York a few months ago, and I am actually already halfway through this. It has a magic school setting which doesn't feel super unique, but it's fun. This I wouldn't say is fully adult fantasy, but it's also a bit more mature than YA. It's one of those in-between books, so I think that that is why I'm finding it easy to digest, but I will probably next check in with you once I finish this. Because it's a sequel, there's obviously only going to be a certain amount that I can say without spoilers, and I always keep my vlogs spoiler free, or at least I keep my vlogs spoiler free unless I've specifically said that they're a spoiler vlog. You can tell that I haven't vlogged in a while because I'm rambling. But anyway, I will check in with you once again when I finish this. Hi everyone, happy Friday. I have just finished work for the week. I've got myself ready because me and my partner partner going out to this pop-up event this evening. I think I talked about this in a vlog recently, but there's a restaurant that I really like who are doing pop-up events over the summer. So they're inviting different food trucks to sell in their courtyard. And I think this evening it's Indian food and it's all vegetarian and vegan, which is great for me because if you don't know, I am vegetarian. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We're also going to the cinema afterwards to see a new horror movie. I can't ever remember the name of the movie, but it's the one about the children that go missing. I'll put a picture on the screen because I cannot remember the name of it. It's more Sam's kind of thing. He's really into horror movies. I am not a horror movie hater, but I'm also not someone who would go out of their way to watch a horror movie. There's other genres that I would prefer to watch, but we're going to do that this evening and hopefully we both enjoy it. In terms of reading updates, I have finished ep.4 by L.R. Lamb. I finished this, I was going to say last night, it wasn't last night, it was this morning. I tried to finish it last night, but I was getting tired. So I read the last 40 pages this morning before work and I enjoyed this. I'm going to give it 4 stars. It's probably closer to a 3.5. I didn't feel as invested in this compared to the first book. I think I would have had a higher investment if I'd read it immediately after the first book, but it wasn't out, so I couldn't do that. It was still a fun time though. I love the world in this. I find it really immersive and I love it when you can tell that an author has put a lot of thought into their world. I feel like I could ask L.R. Lamb questions about this world and they would have all the answers. So that I think was the strongest thing about this series. The characters didn't have a lot of depth and there were parts where a character would do something and I felt like I was being told this character has just done this thing and I wasn't really following how we'd got there or what the characters' motivations were. It was all a little bit telling instead of showing, but like I said, I enjoyed the setting. I felt immersed in the story. I think it is a real shame that the first book, Dragonfall, if you don't know, it came out the same day as Fourth Wing, and so I think some people picked up Dragonfall expecting it to be another Fourth Wing and it's not. They're very different, but because of that it does have a lower than average rating on Goodreads and I think that's putting some people off from reading it. And yeah, I think it is a shame because I think a lot of people would really enjoy this series if you like queer fantasy, if you like a queer norm world. The main character is non-binary and there's a lot of discussion around gender, which I appreciated. So yeah, I would say this is a solid 4-star series for me. It's not a new favourite, but it is one that I will continue to recommend because I think so many people would enjoy this. It's just a shame that that average rating is putting some people off. I'm going to continue getting ready and then I will come back and do another spin. In fact, let's do another spin now before I go out and I can talk through some options but let you know tomorrow what I've decided to pick up because I doubt I'm going to read anything this evening. Okay, so roll number 2 is a 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is challenge. And the challenge is to read a book that's rated high on Goodreads. I've had to stick my hair up because it is boiling in my flat. It's 27.5 degrees, which is over 80 degrees Fahrenheit if you're not familiar with Celsius. So I'm struggling. I thought I would be fine to film just a 5-minute vlog update, but apparently not. So as you will have seen, we landed on a challenge and I need to read a book that's rated highly on Goodreads. The irony is not lost on me that I was literally just talking about Dragonfall having a low average rating on Goodreads. The book that I'm currently listening to would count for this. I started a new audiobook last night called The New Age of Sexism by Laura Bates, and it's a non-fiction which has a 4.5 average rating on Goodreads, so I could just count that for this prompt and then do another roll. I don't know whether that's cheating though because I started it yesterday. I only listened to the first hour while I was out for a walk. I need to think on this and decide whether I want to cheat or not. I could just cut this out and not tell you that I'm thinking about cheating, but this is my game. So if I decide to cheat, then that's okay. So I have decided that I am going to use The New Age of Sexism by Laura Bates for this particular role, mostly because I'm about 40% of the way through this and I'm really liking it so far. Like is probably the wrong word because it's not really a book that you read for enjoyment, but I went out today and bought a physical copy, as you can see. It mentions a lot of statistics and I wanted to be able to refer back to them easily. The audiobook is great, it's narrated by the author. It's obviously much easier to go backwards when you read in a physical copy compared to the audiobook. Also, I got this cheaper in Waterstones. I went in and apparently they do price match if you see the price lower online. So it was meant to be 20 quid, but I got it for 16, which is really cool. If you don't know who Laura Bates is, by the way, she is an activist and campaigner who mostly campaigns for gender equality. And the tagline for this is how the AI revolution is reinventing misogyny. So I've read the first 2 chapters. I'm partway through chapter 3. The first chapter was on deepfakes, and there was one statistic which shocked me. It said 96% of deepfake images are images created of women without their consent, and it's just shocking. This is making me feel so angry, but it's meant to do that. So I did want to set that expectation actually, because it's also making me feel quite anxious. It gives real cases of women who have been affected by this type of situation. There are some people who have this mentality that if something isn't real, then there's no harm, but that's not the case. When you hear from people who have actually been affected, it's not the case at all. It also talks about how in some countries, if someone were to discover this type of image of you, then your life is at risk. So how people can use the argument that there's no real harm is just, it's ridiculous in my opinion. I think Laura Bates does a lot of work with young people in schools, which is really interesting. She's mentioned it at certain points throughout this, and it feels very well researched to me. I'm not an expert. I don't read non-fiction that often because when I want to read non-fiction, I want to read stuff like this and it makes me feel anxious and angry, but I think it's really important as well. I will probably check in with you once I've finished this. It's quite a short book. Like I said, I'm about 40% of the way through and it's 300 pages in the physical copy, but the audiobook is only 8 hours long, so I'm reading through it quite quickly and I don't want to have to pause to update the vlog. I'd rather just listen to it in my own time and then I'll give you my thoughts once I finished it. If you are curious about my thoughts on Weapons, which is the movie that I kept forgetting the name of, we went to see it last night and it was really good. I'm obviously not a horror movie expert or anything, but I do like watching a horror movie at the cinema because just the immersion and the experience is just so good. And yeah, it was really eerie. It's by the same director as Barbarian, which I saw a few years ago, and that was also very weird. It was worth watching, but it's not a film that I would watch again, and I think the same with Weapons. It was really good, but a lot of my enjoyment came from me not having a clue what was going on and then slowly piecing everything together. I also liked how it played with perspectives and stuff like that. It was really good. There were some really tense moments, some good jump scares, which I always appreciate, so would recommend. Sam, my partner, absolutely loved it and gave it 5 stars. He uses Letterboxd, whatever it's called. I don't. I just, yeah, don't watch movies that often because I'm usually reading. But that is everything I think I have to say. I have left this update quite late. It's 9 o'clock, so I'm gonna go and get into bed. I'm not gonna be reading The New Age of Sexism. I'm gonna be reading a different book, but I will tell you about that once I finish this one. I have finished The New Age of Sexism and this was fantastic. I forgot to mention it's not out in the US yet. It comes out in the US in September, but it's out already in the UK. It's been out for a while. I listened to the audiobook through BookBeat, which is the audiobook platform that I use. I think I've got a referral code that I can give you. It's like a refer a friend code. I'll leave that linked in the description just in case you would be interested in checking it out. But this was so interesting, but also if you are someone who has anxiety, then maybe look into different ways of of consuming this topic because it made me feel very anxious. Laura Bates has done several podcasts. One I watched with Grace Beverley, which again, I will leave linked in case you would like to check that out. But I think this is a really important topic that we should be talking about. If you read Anibot by Sierra Greer and you appreciated the themes in that, then this is a non-fiction version of that. Anibot is one of my favourite books of the year. I don't want to directly repeat some of the stuff in this book because I really want people to read it, but there's a couple of chapters on sex robots as well as AI companions, and it was just really interesting because these companies pitch themselves as altruistic. They really want to fix loneliness. However, is that actually the case? Because their marketing doesn't seem to suggest that. I also loved, there was a chapter towards the end all about data sets. The chapter was called The New Age of Discrimination, Designing AI, and it talked about how AI is being trained by data sets. And if those data sets have biases that exist in the real world, if you train AI using biased data, then those biases are going to be present in the AI. It gave some examples of where there was a company that were using this tool as part of their recruitment process, and they had to stop using it because this AI was discriminating against minority groups. It gave some examples of where AI is being used by the police or within healthcare, and it's just shocking. The obvious solution to this is to make sure tech companies are more diverse, but that's not happening. Laura Bates was actually at Hay Festival this year, and I missed the talk that she did, but I've seen that she's going to be at Cheltenham Literature Festival and Birmingham Literature Festival this year, so I might look into seeing if I can get a ticket for one of those events because I really want to hear her speak about this in person. Roll number 3 is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is a challenge. And, oh, okay, the prompt is to read a book from my physical TBR. So for this next roll, we landed on challenge, and the challenge was to read a book from my physical TBR. Really simple, really easy in theory. However, I tend to prioritise my Kindle TBR over my physical TBR because I prefer reading on my Kindle, but it's good that this came up because I tend to ignore the books that I actually own physically, and I've been thinking recently I really should get to some of the books that I bought when I was in New York last February. It's been nearly 18 months since I bought these books, and I need to get them off my TBR because they are all books that I think I'm really going to love. First up, we have 2 Simon Jimenez books, The Spear Cuts Through Water and The Vanished Birds. I decided not to go with either of these, even though these are both 5-star predictions. They're both literary sci-fi fantasy, and I've been reading quite a lot of sci-fi and fantasy recently, specifically fantasy, so I think I'm going to save these for probably the winter. I said this last year, I was meant to read these last year and I didn't get around to them, but hopefully I will get around to them this year. That leaves 2 books, Nothing to See Here and Monstrilio, and I decided to go with Monstrilio because it's one that I think I'm more in the mood for. Also, I love this cover compared to the UK edition. That's why I bought it while I was in the US. It's also signed as well. I got this from Books Are Magic in Brooklyn, and the signature is actually really cute. Look at that. If you don't know, this is literary horror, specifically grief horror. So it's following a couple who, right at the beginning of the book, find that their son has died. He's 11 years old and he was actually born with only 1 lung, which meant that doctors didn't actually expect him to live that long, but it completely devastates this couple. We're actually, in the first part, we're only following the mother, whose name is Magos. She decides to cut out a piece of her son's lung, and when she travels home to Mexico, a family friend tells her that if she feeds this piece of lung, then it might grow into something. It's very surreal, and there's parts where you just have to kind of go with it. This doesn't really have a plot. It's very much following these characters and their experience with grief. I feel like it's more trying to evoke a feeling from you rather than be entertaining, for example, which is to be expected with grief horror. I liked the first part, however, I'm glad that we've now switched perspectives, because I think this perspective that we're now following is going to give a different perspective on things. It's split into 4 parts, and each part follows a different character, which I quite like. So yeah, I'm only about 25% of the way through, about a quarter of the way through, but I'm liking it so far. It's not giving me 5-star feelings, but that's okay. The reason I bought this is because I saw loads of people a few years ago putting it on their best books of the year list. So I did have high expectations at the time that I bought it, but since then I've not heard many people talking about it, which is fine. I'm still interested in giving it a go, but I do think that's helped me to temper my expectations. So I'm now over halfway through Monstrilio. I'm about 60% of the way through, I would guess, and I don't know what to make of this. I'm definitely not disliking it. I am liking it. It's feeling like a solid 4 stars. It feels very mundane. We're following these characters as they're going about their daily lives, except there is this creature, Monstrilio. I don't know whether it's a really obvious metaphor, but I have kind of assumed that Monstrilio is meant to represent what can grow from grief. The mother of the boy who died becomes obsessed and forms a very deep attachment to this creature, and she keeps saying to everyone, oh, I know that he's not my son, but that's not the case. Her behaviour isn't mirroring her actions, and it's interesting. Nothing much is happening, but it's still interesting. The second part follows the best friend of the mom, and I felt like their voices were very similar. I kept forgetting that I was following a different character that wasn't the mother, but this third section that I've just started follows the dad, and I'm very curious to see what happens there. I didn't realise this was going to span quite a significant amount of time. I don't know how many years it's been. Every so often there will be a little time jump or a larger time jump, and I'm finding it's a bit jarring. It's not the smoothest pacing wise. I have noticed there's some questions at the end of the book that are there for if you're reading this as part of a book club, for example. I haven't read them because I don't want to be spoiled. I don't know whether the questions are going to be spoilery, but I am going to read them once I get to the end of the book, and I think that might help me to form some more coherent thoughts, because right now I'm reading it and I'm turning the page. Every so often something will happen that will feel very abrupt to me, and I guess that's the horror element where that's coming into it, and I don't know whether I love those parts. I'm not disliking it. Like I said earlier, it feels like a solid 4 stars. I do like the settings in this. Part of the book takes place in Mexico City, and then other parts take place in New York, and New York is one of my favourite cities. So we'll give you a final update once I've finished this, but I reckon I can finish it tonight, because even though it feels very meandering and like it's just plodding along, I am reading it quite quickly because I'm intrigued. I have now finished Monstrilio by Gerardo Simona Cordova, and I really liked this. The final quarter, the final part, was my favourite thing about the book, and now that I've properly analysed it, I don't know whether I want to give this 5 stars. I think I'm settling on a 4. It's been a while since I've heard people reviewing this book, but what I remember from the reviews that I saw at the time, people seem to be focusing most on the grief element, which is very prominent in the beginning. It's definitely a book about grief, and you follow the characters over several years, and grief isn't something that just disappears. So I understand mentioning that, because I would say that is one of the most prominent themes, but equally this is a book about queerness, and I feel like I haven't heard as many people focusing on that, when I would say that's probably the biggest theme after grief. There's a question towards the end. I think I mentioned there's a reading group guide that you can use if you're reading this as part of a book club, and it talks about how many of the characters in this novel are queer, but the story itself could be analysed through a queer lens. One of the questions is, how does using this framework deepen your understanding of Monstrilio's themes? And when I read that, I thought, oh my goodness, it suddenly clicked. You have this character who feels like they're not being accepted for who they really are, and they're having to hide and suppress that part of themselves. It's so well written, and I would definitely check out more books by this author. this was a debut, and I don't think they've written anything else. The only thing that I struggled with is another theme in this is unconditional love, and that's something that I struggled with a little bit, like the idea that you can love someone so much you would do anything for them. I don't like that. That's something that I do struggle with. But yeah, 4 stars. Really glad that I decided to pick this up, even though it didn't turn out to be a new favourite. I would really recommend this. I have already done another roll, so we'll skip to that now. I did it last night, so I'll insert that footage here, and then I'll pop back in and tell you what I decided to pick up. For our next roll, we've got 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is fantasy. So we landed on fantasy, which wasn't ideal because I am about to read the next Malazan book, which is quite a chunky fantasy, and I didn't want to read another chunky fantasy right before that. That's going to be the first book that I pick up in September. But then I got thinking, there are some series that I need to continue or finish, and the next book in the Assistant to the Villain series by Hannah Nicole Mayra just came out in August, and I think that's a trilogy. So if I read the 3rd book that's just come out, then I will have completed that trilogy. So I picked up Accomplice for the Villain last night. I read the first 10%, which is like 50 pages, and I'm enjoying it so far. I really liked the first book in this series. The second book kind of fell down a little bit for me. It felt a bit slow and pointless and just kind of meandering. It felt like a middle book in a series, but I'm hoping that this 3rd book is going to be much stronger. This is a book, a cozy fantasy series. I would describe it as cozy fantasy. It's often marketed as romantasy. I feel like that sets the wrong expectation, because romantasy, when you think of romantasy, you think of dark and intense and serious, and this series is so not serious. It's following this main character called Evie, who accepts a job as an assistant to the villain of this world. I kind of view this book, well, this series, as satire. It is not taking itself seriously at all, and the negative reviews that I've seen, because this is a very divisive series, the first book in particular, I see a lot of 5-star reviews and I see a lot of 1-star reviews, and the 1-star reviews I think are from people who have certain expectations for this and it's just not meeting those expectations. But I found it really funny. I think this series already, this 3rd book, has made me laugh a few times. I think if you are interested in giving this series a go, then it's worth reading the first chapter, the epilogue, no, not the epilogue, the prologue of the first book, which you could probably get. You can download samples from Amazon. Even if you don't have a Kindle, you can just download them to the Kindle app on your phone. Just read the prologue and you'll get a vibe of what the humour is like. I find it really dry and sarcastic, and it just works for me. I also think going into this with the expectation that it's going to feel more like a cozy fantasy with a romance, I think that's also gonna help you maybe enjoy it a bit more. But yeah, I will check in with you probably once I'm at the halfway point of this. Obviously there's not too much I can say on the plot because it's the 3rd book in a series, but I love the romance in this. It really makes me smile. It's grumpy sunshine. Evie is very much happy and bubbly, and the villain is, you know, he's a villain and he's kind of dark and brooding, and yes, they sometimes feel like caricatures, but I think that's kind of the point. It's now Saturday. It's also a bank holiday weekend in the UK, which is really exciting. I don't have much planned, to be fair. I'm going out this afternoon. Me and Sam have booked a table at a board game cafe for a few hours, then we're going to go out for food afterwards at the same place we went to last weekend, except it's a different pop-up. It's burgers and craft beer this evening, which is good because I like burgers and I like craft beer. As long as it's vegetarian, I'm pretty sure they will have some kind of vegan or vegetarian option. But in terms of the rest of the weekend, I am hoping to get a lot of reading done. I am also hoping to film 2 videos. I need to film my September TBR, that's the priority, and then I also need to film the video that I've been talking about for a while, where I recommend specific books using specific prompts that you've provided. You know the one that I mean, if you watched my August TBR. But yeah, in terms of reading updates, I am running out of space on my memory card. Be right back. I made it past the halfway point in Accomplice to the Villain last night. I actually got to the halfway point and thought I should really stop here so I can film a vlog update in the morning, but I was enjoying it so much I continued until I got to the 60% mark. So I'm 60% of the way through this and I'm really enjoying it. This, I think, could be my favourite book in the series. The second book I might have already mentioned, I didn't love as much. I felt like we were just plodding along and it was kind of directionless. The plot throughout this series to me doesn't make the most sense. I mean, it's easy to follow, it's just not the strength of the book, and the world building also isn't really the strength of the book. There's a lot of conveniences and it relies on you having knowledge already of medieval fairy tale like worlds. It feels a bit like Shrek. You know how Shrek is set in a fairy tale world where there's already these fairy tale storybook creatures, beings? It's kind of like that, where it relies on your innate knowledge, not innate, but you know, it relies on your ingrained knowledge about medieval fantasy worlds. I feel like I'm going round and round in circles, but the world building isn't the strength, the plot isn't the strength, but I really like the characters. I am so invested in this romance. I don't know what it is. I think it's just doing Grumpy Sunshine really well. The villain, he is a villain. It will have these throwaway lines to make it clear that he is doing villainous things and he has this dark magic, but it's not like you're seeing him be truly mysterious and evil. It's more like he's the grumpy boss. I mean, this feels like a workplace romance. The setting, like the main setting of the office, the villain's lair, it feels, I don't know if this is actually the case, but I kind of picture it as this medieval castle, but inside it's like a modern office. They don't have technology and stuff, but it's like an office and you have the HR manager. Evie is the bright and bubbly assistant who's kind of a little bit annoying, but he also finds her really endearing and it's really fun. I am gonna stop apologising for how much I like this series. I understand why people don't like it, okay? I see the 1-star reviews. It doesn't have a bad average rating on Goodreads, to be fair. I think the first book has like a 3.9 average rating, but I might have said this already, I think it's really down to your expectations and what you want. If you're looking for a silly, fun time, then I think this delivers, but humour is so subjective. So what I find funny, other people aren't necessarily going to find funny. I wonder if I can find some quotes that aren't spoilery that I can give as an example. My favourite character, if you're wondering, is Kingsley, who is a frog. I was going to call him a talking frog. He doesn't talk with words, but he holds up signs which he writes on using chalk to communicate with people, and he's just so sassy and funny and I love him. I feel like this book in particular is the funniest book. I mean, it's been like a year since I read the first book and the first book was quite funny. The humour in the second book was still there. It wasn't as strong in my opinion, but this is bringing it back to what I loved about the first book and I'm really excited to finish it. I'm going to try and finish it before we go out this afternoon. How long have I got left? It says on my Kindle I've got 2 hours 34 minutes left, so I'm probably not going to be able to finish it before we go out this afternoon, but I can at least try and get a good chunk read.
Let me show you a bit. Don't need to play no game. So why'd you say I quit being overthinking about everything? Give it up, tell you what I wanna say right now. 'Cause I could do the John Hughes kinda or cliche, but either way I need to say anything. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I need to say anything. When you call up, I get thought up like I'm being alright. I get nervous on the surface, ain't a James Dean type. We're just cooped up in a cruiser on the
I have now finished Accomplice to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mehra, and I'm going to give this 4 stars. However, I'm annoyed because I realised when I was about 70% of the way through, this isn't the last book in the series. There's a 4th book that's coming out, I'm assuming, at some point next year. Don't quote me on that because I don't know. There's not a release date yet. But I'm annoyed because I thought this was a trilogy. I thought I was finishing a series, and that's not the case. I don't think this series needed to be 4 books long. I'm not that invested in the plot. I'm invested in the characters and the romance, and I think I would have preferred it, knowing now that there's going to be 4 books, I would have preferred it if each book had been episodic, if there'd been a different enemy or a different dastardly scheme that the characters were doing in each book, and then the romance had been the only thing that had continued to tie the books together. Obviously the characters would have been the same, but do you know what I mean? Like, I think if this had been more of an episodic series, then that would have worked a bit better. But there's this overarching plot. Each book builds on the previous book, and the plot involves this prophecy that I just don't really care that much about. I do think this 3rd book, the reason I'm giving it 4 stars when I gave the 2nd book 3 stars, is because I think the 3rd book did a better job of recapping and reminding us of stuff that had happened in previous books, whereas book 2 was so confusing. It hadn't even been that long since I'd read the 1st book, but obviously stuff doesn't stay in your memory forever, and I don't think the plot in this is super unique, or I don't think there's enough that makes it stand out and makes it something that I remember easily. So yeah, I spent a lot of book 2 feeling lost and confused, but I think you can see that Hannah Nicole Mehra has grown as a writer with this 3rd book. It's still not taking itself too seriously, it's still very like silly, but I think the silliness is what gives it that charm. Even on the front cover, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but it says insert witty evil catchphrase here, and just stuff like that makes it seem to me like it's very self-aware. It knows exactly what it is. It's not trying to pretend to be anything different, it just is what it is. And yeah, I think it's fun. It's not a favourite series for me. It's consistently like 4 stars. I gave the 1st book 4 stars, 2nd book was a 3, 3rd book was a 4. Hopefully the next book will either be a 4 or a 5. I am going to read it because I'm invested at this point, but if I find out there's going to be a 5th book, I'm going to be really annoyed. That does mean we are moving on to the next roll, which I have already done, so I'll insert that footage now and then I'll come back in and tell you what I decided to pick up. I've just counted, and if we land on a 5 or a 6, then this is the last roll of the vlog. It's a 2, 1, 2, which is thriller or horror. So we landed on thriller or horror, and this was perfect because I was really in the mood for a thriller or a horror, more so a thriller, and I wanted an audiobook because I finished my last audiobook a few days ago. I've already started the book, so I'm going to talk in past tense, but basically when I was choosing a thriller to pick up on audio, I was looking through BookBeat and I realised that I only had 8 hours left until the end of the month, so it had to be a relatively short audiobook, and I kid you not, most of the audiobooks that I wanted to listen to were around 8.5 hours or 9 hours, and that is not gonna work because I want to finish this book before the end of the month. I don't want to get 70% of the way through a book and then have to wait a few days until my hours renew. But I did find one thriller that wasn't an Agatha Christie book because that was going to be my other option, but I managed to find a thriller that I'm actually really enjoying so far. It's called One of the Good Guys by Araminta Hall, I think is the author. I should probably double check that, but I've left my phone on the other side of the room. I started this a few days ago. I'm about 17% of the way through. I think this audiobook is literally 8 hours long, or 7 hours and 50 minutes. Sometimes I do listen to audiobooks as I'm falling asleep and I put a timer on so that it finishes at the end of the chapter, but I literally can't do that with this because if I fall asleep and it carries on playing for like 10 minutes, then I'm gonna go over my allotted hours for the rest of this month. But I started this the other day. I went for a morning walk and yeah, it feels a bit sinister so far. I do feel like we are building up to something that's going to be a bit dark and twisted. So from what I gather, because there's multiple narrators on the audiobook, I think there's going to be multiple POVs, but the main guy that we're following, I think his name is Cole. He recently went through a breakup. Him and his wife are getting divorced. So he decides to move to the coast and he starts afresh. He has a new job. He meets a woman who lives not far from him, and and there's some kind of interest there. I don't know whether they're going to start an actual relationship. Something feels off about this guy already. We are inside his head and hearing his internal monologue. It's told in first person POV, and he doesn't understand why his marriage broke down. He thinks it's because they were struggling to conceive. He's contradicting himself quite a lot though. Like, he'll say something about how his wife ran her own business, and he will sometimes think stuff like, oh, I thought she was happy running her own business and being more successful than me, but maybe that's not the case. It feels like he's very much trying to push the blame onto everyone else. Nothing is his fault. Lots of red flags is what I'm feeling so far, but I think that's adding to the atmosphere. It's making me feel a bit on edge and a little bit uneasy. I haven't looked too much into the synopsis, but there's also, at the start of the book, it mentions there's a group of women who are doing this charity walk across the south coast of the UK to raise money for I think it's a domestic violence or a domestic abuse charity. I'm not quite sure. It's something like that, but they are doing this walk and they're about to go through this small community where this guy is living. Very curious to see what I think of this, because when I added it on Goodreads, I noticed that it doesn't have the highest average rating. However, on BookBeat, it has like a 4.4 rating for the narration, and I think the actual star rating, because on BookBeat you rate based on your enjoyment of the story as well as the narration, and it's got really good ratings on BookBeat. So as an audiobook, apparently people are enjoying it, which just goes to show you shouldn't just rely on Goodreads when it comes to how people feel about a book. But anyway, I'm rambling. I'm going to wrap up this clip, and I think I am going to go for a walk later this evening, so I will hopefully check in with you with some more updates in the morning. I did not get round to filming a vlog update yesterday, but I did get round to continuing One of the Good Guys by Araminta Hall. I'm now around 50% of the way through, and I'm really enjoying this. However, I think I'm enjoying it because of the audiobook. I don't think I would be enjoying this as much if I were reading it physically, mostly because it's a domestic thriller, and domestic thrillers aren't my favourite. They used to be. Back when I was first reading thrillers, I read a lot of domestic thrillers, and I think I just got a bit bored of them. However, I've noticed that when I listen to a domestic thriller on audio, I'm much more likely to enjoy it. I think because domestic thrillers are so character driven, that's maybe why they don't usually work for me, because when I'm reading a thriller, I care more about the plot and I end up getting a bit bored when it's just a character drama. However, with an audiobook, if you've got a good audiobook narrator, then they can really bring the character to life, and I feel like that's what's happening with this book. The characters in this book are not likable people, and because it's told in first person POV and the narrators are so good, I feel like I'm just listening to these people. I don't think the plot is anything unique. There is a mystery, however, the mystery doesn't seem to be the focus. The focus does seem to be on this relationship. But I'm interested to see what direction it's going in. This does have some social commentary, and because of that, I feel like I have worked out what direction it's going in, but I don't have any theory. Well, I do have theories on the mystery, very basic theories. I can't really explain it in another way. I think that the voice actors are really acting their socks off, and it's just very easy to listen to. So I'm going to listen to some more of it while I'm on my lunch break. I'm going to pop out for a walk. I think I'm also going to go for a walk this evening. Then I'm driving to and from the office tomorrow. So that should bring me to the end of the audiobook, and then I can wrap up my final thoughts. I have now finished One of the Good Guys by Araminta Hall, and I'm going to give this 4 stars. I think the audiobook was definitely the right way to go with this book. It was so well produced. There are these multimedia elements like interviews, newspaper articles, text messages that are really brought to life on the audiobook. It has a full cast. One of the best thriller audiobooks that I've listened to probably in a while. while saying that. If you look on Goodreads and you go through the negative reviews, one of the common things that people are saying is that it's a bit on the nose. And I definitely noticed that with the dialogue. It felt like characters were talking in a way that didn't feel fully natural. It was very direct, and I don't have an issue when an author has a theme that they're looking to explore and they want it to be obvious what they're trying to say. I don't mind that. So that wasn't like a super negative thing for me. However, if you look at some of the other negative reviews, there's also reviews that are criticising decisions that are made by the characters and saying that this has anti-feminist messaging. I don't think that's the case at all. My interpretation is that the author presented this situation, built up the characters, and yes, it was a bit direct in the way that it built up the characters, but I don't think the author was condoning certain actions. I don't think the author was saying these characters did things right. I think the intention of the book was to spark a discussion, and I think it does that. So I think it achieves what it set out to achieve. It is just a bit confusing because at times this felt like just your standard run-of-the-mill domestic psychological thriller. It's difficult to tell on the audiobook, but the writing didn't feel super flowery or elevated, and because it was so direct, it did sometimes feel very basic. But then on the other hand, it also at times, especially towards the end, it felt like it was trying to be a literary character study. So the two didn't quite mesh together, and that's why it's a 4 stars and not a 5. So yeah, mixed feelings overall, mostly positive because I had such a good time listening to the audiobook. But we are now going to move on to our next role and find out what I'm going to be reading, if I'm going to be reading anything else, because we are so close to the end of the board. Let's find out if this is going to be the final roll of the vlog. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have now escaped the board, which means I'm going to be wrapping up this reading vlog here finally, because I think this is one of the longest episodes of this series that I've ever done. Did we have 5 or 6 books in this vlog? I can't actually remember. I've been filming it for over 2 weeks. So yeah, it's about time that I wrap things up. But thank you for watching if you made it this far. I think the next episode of this vlog will probably be in October or November. I would like to do one more of these episodes before the end of the year, but I'm not sure when is going to be best. So yeah, let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Click subscribe if you'd like to see more videos from me. But otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye.